Hello, everybody. This is Brad Johnson here, and welcome to Portal to Ascension interviews. I'm very, very happy to do an interview with a very special guest today. I want to thank Neil Gore again for putting this together through Portal to Ascension. We have a very special guest. His name is Jamie Janover. And before we bring Jamie in, I'm just going to go ahead and do a brief look into his bio and just read that out for everybody in case some of you are not familiar with him. Jamie is a true innovator. He has long been interested in the intersection of science and all things considered spiritual and metaphysical. So when he first came across Nassim Haramein lecturing at a music festival, all the dots connected. Ever since that time in the summer of 2002, he has been delving ever deeper into the world of unified physics and ancient cultures through the lens of Nassim Haramein's theories, sharing resonant information in presentations he delivers while on tour as a musician. Jamie was taught by Nassim Haramein how to deliver presentations on his unified field theory in 2008 as one of the Resonant Project's original 12 emissaries. In 2012, he became the Resonant Project's first ambassador and took over for Nassim in teaching 3-day delegate programs, which have since been an online intensive course with thousands of students from 77 countries from all over the world. Jamie has delivered more than 250 comprehensive presentations and a dozen delegate program weekends on Nassim's work at private events, conferences, and festivals worldwide in places as far-reaching as New Zealand, Egypt, India, Canada, Indonesia, Spain, Costa Rica, Australia, Portugal, Mexico, and all across the USA. Again, a very impressive bio here, so why don't we go ahead and bring Jamie on. Jamie, are you with us? Hi, Jamie. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for being on the program today. I really appreciate it. And again, a very impressive bio as well, too. Also looking into your background as a musician as well, too, and you have quite a strong innovation there also. But we'll focus on a lot of the unified field today and also the Resonance Project. So for a lot of people who have heard a lot about Nassim Haramein, maybe they're not too familiar about the Resonance Project. Can you share a little bit more information about what the Resonance Project is all about?
Yeah, it's actually evolved even since it was called the Resonance Project. It's now the Resonance Science Foundation. Nassim Haramein started that project as a project a really long time ago. And the goal of the project was pretty much met, which was to get this information surrounding unified field theory out to the world. Because for a long time, Nassim was operating, totally independently as a researcher, not connected to major organizations like universities and governmental science foundations and stuff. And he kind of came across his own way of describing the universe in terms of the physics and was working under other people. And then for a decade developed this theory and got it out to the world. And he felt like that mission was accomplished, and now he's trying to take it to another level, which is, collaborating with physicists around the world and bringing people together in a community that exists now online, like you were saying, with people from 77 countries plus, I think, at this point, studying these ideas of unified physics and being more in collaboration, as well as working on technologies in a lab, developing experiments and various types of technologies that are based off of and work because of his understanding in the unified physics.
Very good, excellent. Well, let's look more into the unified field theory, because I think that's really where a lot of Nassim's work focuses on. I've also been studying him since 2008 as well, and it's just, I was really, really blown away by a lot of the information that he's received. And I know it's very hard to sum it up like within a half-hour interview as well too, but as if there's like an elevator or a nutshell version in regards to the unified field theory, with what a lot of people are wondering, what is Nassim attempting to do here with the unified field? Can you explain a little bit more in that kind of nutshell version, if possible?
If you're literally in an elevator and you have about 2 or 3 floors to get the information to somebody, I basically say there's a bunch of stuff and it's all connected. That's it. That's the 2-second version of unified field theory. And then you can expand upon that to infinity. In other words, if you're going to try to explain something, the universe, which probably is in an infinite structure, you could spend an infinite amount of time describing it, right? So you have to kind of carefully choose, oh, really? How many minutes do I have? Go forever describing things. But that's the short answer of it, is that this thing that we're in, that we tend to call the universe or the multiverse, you can call it whatever you want, is one thing, and it's not separate from itself. It's all connected, literally and figuratively. And that's what unified field theory is. It's describing what is the one thing. What do you mean it's one thing? How is it connected? Give me the mechanics for that. Don't just tell me, oh yeah, we're all one. Because we've heard this forever, right? Like the Ascended Masters of the planet have been trying to get this across to us for a very long time. And they would do it in a more spiritual, metaphysical way. Like they might close their eyes and sit, cross-legged and hold their hands like this and be meditating. And then be like, oh, we're all one. And you've heard a lot of people say that in different ways throughout the ages. And you're like, okay, sometimes I feel like that, and sometimes I don't feel like that at all, and it doesn't make any sense. What do you mean we're all connected? I'm connected to the people that I don't agree with on the other side of the world? Yeah. And so, okay, well, you better give me some details on that. I don't want just spiritual, metaphysical, religious information that I have to have faith in to believe. I also want, at the same time, not instead of, but at the same time, I want the data. I want the facts. I want scientific method-based proof, logically, how and why are we connected, and what's the mechanics for that? And that's where physics comes in, and that's where Nassim Haramein and many other people, of course, have been looking into this, not just taking the word of the Ascended Masters, but like, let's apply the scientific method to things that we generally don't think of trying to apply the scientific method to. Things like consciousness and spirituality and the soul and whatever this thing is that people call God. Everybody has a different story about what that is. And so how do you describe that in the physics? This is like an area that a lot of physicists don't want to go down, because a long time ago, right, we started to develop this idea of like, oh, let's collect data and we'll have a hypothesis, right? Scientists started to gather all this information. And then things started pointing towards this idea that everything was connected. And then they got up with this idea of like, oh, there might be this like field of information that everything comes from. They used to call it like the Akashic records or something. And so then they started calling it the ether. Remember this? Before Einstein, this physicists were coming to this point where they were like, oh yeah, it's all coming from the ether. And then it was like, ooh, the ether. That sounds a little too magical. That's a little too mystical. And the physicists didn't want that, because then what happened is physics started saying, look, see, everything is very organized. It's not just random anymore. It does, like, for a long time, people were like, oh yeah, the universe is random, bunch of particles flying around. Boy, are we lucky they organized themselves to create life and DNA and all this stuff. And then physics is like, actually, it doesn't look very random. It looks kind of organized. And then the religious people said, aha, see, you're proving the fact that there's God. And then the physicists were like, oh no, we don't want to start talking about God. And so they had to separate those things. And they were like, okay, you guys can talk about the creator and the intelligent universe, the intelligent mind that must have created all this. We're going to go with the universe is just mechanical, and it's a bunch of stuff that moves around using mathematical equations. And over a long period of time, if you have randomness, eventually some stuff might organize and then become more organized, and here we are, here's life. And so this huge dichotomy came, where the physics people and the science people went this way, and the religious people went this way, and it went really far apart, all the way to the point where you had Descartes, right, being like, oh yeah, the mind and the body, those are two separate things. Yeah, don't worry about it, as if we could separate out what the body is doing from what the mind is doing. And now we know, thanks to lots of research in all different disciplines of science, is that you can't do that. The mind and the body are very much one thing. And we even started separating out, like, oh, what kind of sick are you? Do you need to go see a medical doctor or a psychologist? And we're starting to learn that those should be the same person. That, the mental faculties that you have are affecting your biology, right? Thank you, epigenetics. And people like Bruce Lipton will tell you all about that. But this all leads me back to the fact that now, thankfully, today in the world of science, because we've gotten down into the micro details of all the physics, all the way down to quantum level and all the way up to the multiverse, we're learning what those mechanics are and how and why everything is connected. And that brings us back to a much more holistic view of the entire picture. And so physics is starting to explain consciousness. And Nassim's latest paper is called Space Memory, about the fact that, you know, even something like memory might not just be coming from your brain. Scientists have been looking for consciousness in the brain, but the brain might turn out to be more like the receiver of a radio, and the consciousness is actually in this field of energy that connects everything: the ether, the plenum, the 0 point field, the quantum foam, space, the vacuum, God, prana, chi, mana, call it whatever you want. The one thing that connects all things is the thing that is the one thing that the universe is. And so if we can describe that in great detail, then hopefully we can understand how the universe works and then operate more coherently and more in resonance with the structure of the universe, instead of, for example, blowing up the universe to make energy, even though we now know, thanks to all these studies, that energy is everywhere and that space is not empty, it's full of this energy. And that's what people like Tesla and, you know, other great inventors along the way have been able to tap into and be able to create, you know, devices that tap into this. The latest and probably the most promising right now that's hit the mainstream anyway is that EM drive that got, you know, studied by NASA, a propellantless engine, something that can create, you know, force and propel the object that it's in without the use of a propellant coming out the other side, supposedly violating the laws of motion and energy. And it turns out that it's not really doing that. It's actually pushing off of this structure that it turns out to be everywhere, what Nassim Haramein calls the Planck field, or the vacuum. And that is the fact that the vacuum, this emptiness of space, is actually made up of these little tiny bits that are vibrating very quickly. Planck scale vibrations. The smallest
Nassim talks a lot about spin, that everything is about spin, right? So your molecules, your atoms, everything like that in that sense. And I think that's kind of the refinement from what he was doing with Einstein, not just looking into the idea of curvature, but also being able to see like the coil, the rotation, the spiral in that way.
Correct. Yeah, you're getting to the next level of detail. Because you can go like what I've been saying forever, right? I'm just giving the biggest, broadest umbrella. I did the 2-second version, and then I did like the 8-minute version, right? Or the 6-minute version, whatever that was.
I'm glad there's versions, so that's good.
Yeah, you know, and so that's kind of been my job, is I kind of landed this from Nassim to the point where I thought, okay, well, I understand what you're saying, and this seems very much information that needs to be spread and for everybody to understand, because the more people you can bring to understanding the coherency of the universe, the more coherency you're going to create in this local part of our environment here in the Milky Way galaxy. So I thought, well, I should probably go try to explain this to people. And over a long period of time, that's what I've been honing in on, is how to do that, and then taking that message and explaining it in a semi-official capacity at conferences and festivals and things like this.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of your own work as well, too, because you've done a lot of research as well, too, like also on ancient origins as well, too. What have you discovered through that particular capacity in regards to like ancient origins, ancient civilizations?
Well, I mean, I would say I personally haven't really discovered much. I've connected a lot of dots in my own head based on a lot of other people's research. So to be clear, I am not a physicist. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm a musician. Who happens to have a degree in psychology. So I suppose I'm a scientist because I have a degree in science from a college, but I didn't ever go into professionally being a psychologist or being a physicist or any scientist. I just, like everybody probably, have asked the big questions, and then I found some big answers, and I thought this seems more coherent and correct than a bunch of the stuff that I was taught in school. And so part of it is, you know, feeling like I need to correct my own education because I was given a bunch of misinformation about the universe.
You and me and a lot of others.
Yeah, and we're still doing it. Like, I think we're still telling kids that the Earth goes around the sun in a circle, you know, and it's doing circular orbits. So you think you're just going around and around over the same path over and over, that's something so simple and so, basic that we could teach kids correctly. And we're stuck in this loop. I think we're still teaching kids that the slaves pulled all the 2,330,000 stones that made the Great Pyramid with vine ropes, and they were, under command of the Pharaoh, and stacked all this stuff up so he could be buried in there. And we know that's not true. Even the Egyptologists now know that the Pharaoh is not buried inside the pyramid, that they came from the Valley of the Kings, which is far away. And yet, I have a feeling they're still showing kids in elementary school books with the guys with the ropes pulling the rocks, and it's not correct. And so why are we still doing that? I mean, we need to figure out what's going on quick. We're still burning fossil fuels when we know that's not smart, and we have ways of getting energy from the quantum vacuum, never mind solar and wind and other ways that doesn't blow up stuff and send particulate into the atmosphere. And we don't have time to just waltz around doing this for another few decades. Like, it might already be too late to save our environment. We got to do this quick. So that's part of why there's urgency, and why I feel like, we need people that understand how to talk regular layman's language to explain things that are very complicated. You can go in and confuse somebody really quickly with a short statement about something that's easy to understand. But if you want to change people's understanding of how physics is describing the quantum vacuum, you have to do some groundwork. People are going to be like, what are you talking about? Quantum vacuum? What's quantum? What's vacuum? You have to define all these things and go, and it takes time, and it takes, practice. And so that's what I've been working on, is to be that layman, describing it in layman's terms, because I am a layman. I'm not trying to translate something complicated that I figured out in advanced physics and bring it down to the layman's level. I'm a layman who stretched to figure out how to understand what those guys are talking about, and then stay here in layman's terms and be like, here's what they're talking about, and define terms and make it so that more people can attach their consciousness to resonant information instead of being confused by the incredible amount of dissonance that is poured out everywhere that you can be in this society, especially in media and advertising and things like that. So
no, that's
like, we all need to be emissaries for the universe, trying to feed back information that's resonant to ourselves to try to figure out how we're going to make things better around here, because stuff is going a little crazy right now. I mean, it's been going crazy all along, but it seems like it's increasingly crazy right now.
I think it's at that point where you're at the precipice, you're at the spout of the greatest change, right? And I think that's really where we are, is we're just getting to that precipice and knowing that if we don't do something quick, it's kind of like we're last minute people, right? We wait until the very last minute where we're just dangling at the edge of the cliff and say, okay, and I reach my other arm, I'm going to climb back up. Now we're going to make things change. I feel that's basically where we're going. We're just waiting for that last sort of precipice before people say, okay, we got to light a fire under us. And now, go, right? So very good. Also looking into ancient civilizations, what I've always found very interesting that Nassim also talked about was the sacred geometry that's found a lot within them. Like, we have a lot of references as it pertains to the flower of life, the 64 tetrahedron grid as well too. What have you done with your research in regards to sacred geometry? Have you found some very interesting innovations in regards to that?
I feel like the innovations really come internally more than innovations in external, like building devices and technologies and stuff. Again, I'm not a technologist, I'm not a fabricator, but the one thing that connects all things that I was talking about, the ether, the plenum, the vacuum, whatever you want to call it, if you want to get literal about it, it's the space itself. It's the structure of space-time, right? Even at the quantum level, smaller than atoms, there's space. Even at the multiverse level, outside of the bubble that we call this universe, what is there? There's probably more space there, right? So space is the one thing that's everywhere. And what's the study of structure in space? It's called geometry. Mm-hmm. So geometry is absolutely the most fundamental thing that there is, really. If there's only one thing and it's space, then you might want to understand what's up with the space. Is it random, or does it have structure to it? If it does have structure, what's that structure? And so when you talk about the geometric structure of space, that is what sacred geometry is. The reason it's sacred, which is just something that you should put in quotes, because, I mean, what is sacred anyway, right? Everything's sacred, maybe. I don't know. But the important thing is that the sacred geometry is the geometry of the vacuum of the universe. It's not a random structure. And so that's where all this stuff comes in. And, the details of what that geometry is where it gets complicated, and it takes a long time to describe. But like you were saying, it has to do with tetrahedral geometries, and the relationship of spheres and tetrahedrons and how they pack together, which is a three-dimensional flower of life, which is a symbol that's been encoded in ancient cultures for thousands of years, which brings you to that tie between the ancient cultures of the planet and the structure of space-time. They knew what it was. And did they know what it was by accident? It's doubtful. And so then the question is, how did they know? And that brings up a whole nother level of thing of like, maybe they got information that wasn't even from our tetra. Maybe it was extraterrestrial information, extraterrestrials. And so you have Nassim Haramein, a physicist who understands how to write equations that somebody like Einstein or Hawking would write or understand. There's not that many people that write those kinds of equations on this planet, right? There's not that many physicists. And of the physicists, how many are working on unified field theory? Not that many. And how many of those people are also willing to go on the record and be like, yeah, obviously there's extraterrestrials and this is the whole thing. There's very few people out there that know this kind of math, that write these kinds of equations, that are even willing to, on the record, say anything about extraterrestrials. Behind the scenes, maybe there's a bunch of them. But go on YouTube and look for the physicists that are talking about extraterrestrials. There's not that many of them. So Nassim's a rare guy who's corrected, probably, some of the things that were missing in Einstein's field equations. Like you said, spin. Einstein talked about space-time curvature, but he didn't include the torque and Coriolis terms in the math in that curvature to make everything spin. And so he was describing, the very first layer or level of understanding the quantum vacuum and the structure of space-time. And Nassim made another layer of understanding, and it's going to keep going like this, right? As physics keeps going, it's just steps in a process. But Nassim did an important thing where he added torque and Coriolis forces and spin into these equations, because obviously everything is spinning from atoms to the universe itself. And so we have to, properly describe the dynamics that we're observing in terms of the math of the physics that is being written. And that's kind of one of the major things that Nassim has done. And he's taking that from there and just, showing the toroidal field that exists on all scales, again, from the atom to galaxies to the universe. And so there is a structure and a dynamic. And if you can understand the structure and the dynamic of the one thing that connects all things, then maybe you can create more resonance in your own behavior and your own thoughts and your own technologies, and act more in accordance with the flow of the universe and learn to literally go with the flow. That's maybe where that term comes from, is like learning how to go with the river that we're in instead of fighting and trying to go upstream or hold on to something. And then, navigate the field that we're in, because we need to seriously navigate. There's some bumps in the road and some rocks in the stream we need to go around and not get stuck on.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I've always looked at sacred geometry as really the hologram of all it is. Like, even wearing your shirt as well, too. It's a good representation of that as well, too. It's kind of like how we look at Star Trek: The Next Generation, where they had the holodecks. And we basically saw that grid, right? So if we were able to put that aspect of the flower of life together, seeing this grid and seeing all consciousness, all thought, being able to create material, create form.
Right.
That really just shows me the building blocks too, where geometry in that way, geometrical universal design, co-creates in that way. So I've always found it fascinating with Nassim, of course, really going into the depths of that and sharing that information.
Right. Nassim's theory he calls holofractographic, which means it's a hologram and it's a fractal. Hologram meaning that inside of a boundary condition, all of the information that's on the inside of that boundary condition is now projected and present on the surface of it. So you can take a hologram image, for example, and cut it in half, and the whole image is on both pieces. And you can keep cutting it in half and cutting it in half and cutting it in half, and the whole thing is present. And so Nassim is basically saying that a proton is a holographic representation of the entire universe, that all the information of all the protons in the entire universe is present in every single proton. And that's how the entire universe can keep its coherency together, and the universe can maintain its structure and understand what's happening at all these different various scales, what Nassim calls scalar dimensions. And it keeps everything connected and working. Otherwise, the universe would disappear or it would fall apart and go away in a short amount of time. And it's still here and it's changing, but it's fairly stable. takes a long time for stuff to change. And thankfully, the planet should be around here for at least a few billion years until the sun becomes a red giant and encompasses the earth. But, all things change, but they change at different rates. And so it's important to understand how that works. And that's what we're trying to figure out. We're novices, human beings,
Right, exactly. No, that's true. Very true. Well, let's shift gears a bit and let's talk a little bit more about your music background as well, too. I've been reading on your website. There's been a lot of innovations in that one. How has that been going with your music projects?
Oh, it's been great. I mean, the universe is infinite, and if you can apply that to music, which is also infinite, then you have an infinite amount of music that you can make in your life. And so it's a process, and it's been fun to just have that worldview of the big picture, and then be like, oh, I could take Indian classical music and put it with electronic bass music, and then play it on an ancient string instrument called a hammer dulcimer, and then create some other type of music that's never been made. And so that's been kind of what I've been working on. I play, percussion, and drums was the first instrument I started playing. And then I found the hammer dulcimer, which is percussion string instrument, and just started improvising on it and creating my own styles. And I was working with geometries for a long time, like finding patterns on the instrument and physically moving my hand in squares and triangles and seeing what music comes out of incorporating different geometries. And I had a song called Triangle and Square and all this stuff. And then years and years later, I found Nassim Haramein, and he started talking about geometry and sacred geometry. I was like, oh yeah, I've heard about this a little bit. And then he started talking about crop circles. And I thought, wait, a physicist talking about crop circles? I thought Doug and Dave made all those, I didn't know anything. And so I started researching all this stuff. And then, I thought, wait a minute, there's a little bit more to this than I thought.
Yeah.
So it's all kind of tied together, the physics and the music and art and photography, all the various creative things that I like doing. It's all one thing, really. It's like describing physics to somebody and keeping their attention in a 4-hour lecture is kind of like playing drums in dance music. You can't just stop. You can't slow down and speed up. You have to be like, oh yeah, this beat connects to this beat, which connects to this beat. You have to keep going. You can't just be like, and then, yeah, unified field theory is like, can you imagine if I started talking like that? People would just be like, and they,
Yeah.
So you gotta, if you want to have a conversation, keep some stuff going. It's like playing music, so we all do it. We all know how to play music. We're talking, anytime you're talking to somebody, you're jamming.
It's a rhythm.
Improvised music.
Exactly. Well, this is great. Like I was looking a lot into your bio, and I see that you have done a lot of amazing things as well too. A lot of the innovation that you're bringing to music, as well as being part of this Delegate Program as well too. You gotta be a busy guy.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been fun to be busy on this kind of thing. Again, it's so interesting. It's infinite. I'll never be done. Not like you're like, oh, I'm healthy. Sweet. I don't have to try to be healthy anymore. I've achieved health. It's like, no, that's not how that goes. It's like yoga and music are the same thing. They're infinite.
So are there other upcoming events for yourself, either through the Delegate Program or through your music? Are there certain things that are happening coming up here that any projects that you want to talk about coming up?
Well, the Delegate Program is constantly going. It's an online course that's a community, and we meet on a regular basis in these hangouts on this very same thing on Zoom. Up to 100 people or something sometimes will show up. And Nassim will be on there, and a bunch of the other faculty will be on there, and people one by one ask questions, and we have conversations. And other times it's just live with Nassim, and he riffs on whatever is the latest thing that's happening. Meanwhile, there are all these modules that you can go and study on your own pace. All of Nassim's work for the last 30 years formatted into a course where you go page by page with references, starting from the beginning of physics, the whole history of physics, right? So you can understand where we are now. Mm-hmm. And then unified physics and how it's different than traditional physics. And then how this applies to ancient cultures. And then the implications and the applications of this future technology that we're going to develop here, or we're already developing, on our society. And so it's the huge picture. You can take months to go through it, or you can do it all in a day, binge the program if you want. But the best part of it for me is that there's people from all over the world, and there's like minds in there having conversations that you would maybe be afraid to have on Facebook. Like if you went on Facebook on your personal page and you started talking about some of the most fringe esoteric aspects of this work, there's maybe some people that are like, what are you talking about? Like, whoa, man, this is too crazy for me. And in this program, you can talk about anything, and there's like minds in there being like, yeah, I've kind of thought those semi-crazy thoughts too, because I'm trying to figure out how the universe works too. And oh, you think like that too? Sweet. And you're from which country? Like on the other side of the planet? Oh, cool. I have this feeling and this sense that I'm part of this huge international community of people that are also coming upon the same set of information, asking the same questions, on the same quest. And that's the best part of it to me. And that's constantly going. And then, I go out and do talks. I'll be in Denver, Colorado, if anybody happens to be wanting to come see this full presentation. I do a 4-hour presentation in Denver on February 19th.
Okay.
You can find me, look me up on Facebook or whatever, and check out the event invite and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to just mention if you want to share your website for everybody who wants to check out your work. And
yeah, jamiejanover.com, Jamie Janover on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm doing music. I also have gigs with a band called Prang that weekend in Denver, which is with Steve Kimmock. He's a great guitar player. And then a couple of guys, Jason and Travis, that are in a band called The String Cheese Incident. They're also in a band called Yodo, which is an electronic duet. So it's a quartet, and we're doing electronic, improvised electronic music.
Great. Excellent. Well, this is great. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for being on the Portal to Ascension interview today. I really appreciate it. We have a lot of viewers, but I think they're just listening to everything you're saying. So
cool.
It's great.
Yeah, thanks again, and thanks to Neil and Portal to Ascension for putting this together. I've done a few events with you guys, and if anybody is interested, in Portal Ascension, one of the talks is me doing this with slides for 5.5 hours. There's a 5.5 hour unified field theory presentation inside Portal to Ascension, and then I think I did a 2-hour crop circle talk and another 3 or 2 or multiple hour one on ancient cultures. So just even within Portal to Ascension, there's a bunch more information that we have available. So I really appreciate folks like yourself and Neil taking the time to help spread this information. It's definitely what the world needs at this point in our history.
Well, it's actually a very interesting concept, because I'm just coming up with an event here in Portal to Ascension about sacred geometry, light language, sacred circuitry, all of that as well too. So some interesting connections there. But anyways, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank everybody for joining us today. And feel free to check out more portaltoascension.org and Jamie's website, jamiejanover.com. Thank you so much, Jamie. We'll talk soon.
Take care. Much love.
Namaste.